how much can one person, really shape the destiny of a whole nation? And what does that take? Relentless ambition, vision, just sheer resilience. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the really extraordinary life of Alexander Hamilton. We're leaning heavily on Ron Chernow as a definitive biography. It's so comprehensive, people often just call it the book.
Right. And our mission here is really to unpack how Hamilton's background, which was pretty unique, and his incredible intellect, and some controversial choices, how all that didn't just, happen during America's founding, but actually laid the foundations for the modern U.S. We'll look at his personal flaws, his huge political wins, all through the lens of this meticulously researched book. What's really fascinating, I think, from Chernow's work is how his individual story, his very personal journey, became so tied up with the birth of the nation itself.
Okay, so let's unpack that journey. Where does it even start? We're talking almost mythical origins, aren't we? An illegitimate orphan from Nevis, this tiny kind of tumultuous island in the British West Indies. The book paints such a vivid picture of that place, even mentions disasters like Jamestown being swallowed by the sea. Gives you a real sense of instability.
It really does. And his mother, Rachel Fawcett, she had this defiant streak, mentally tough. You can almost see a foreshadowing of Hamilton's own passionate willfulness there, and the conditions he saw. The book calls the Caribbean sugar economy inimitable savagery, just barbaric treatment of slaves. Chernow argues this gave him an ineradicable pessimism about human nature, which raises a big question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How did that kind of brutal environment shape someone who would later champion a unified nation so fiercely?
It suggests maybe he saw fragility firsthand, and that drove his later push for order. But then there's this incredible twist of fate for how he got out of there, his escape from poverty. The book details this hurricane, a destructive one, that actually became his salvation.
Yeah, it's amazing. He wrote this account of it, so powerful that local businessmen were impressed. They started a subscription fund to send this, quote, promising youth to North America for an education.
Wow, what a turn.
It's a gripping story, isn't it? Like the archetype of the immigrant who just completely reinvents himself. Though Chernow points out the paradox, his education was partly funded by, sugarcane harvested by slaves. A real complexity there.
Right, so he arrives in North America, goes to Elizabethtown Academy first.
Exactly. And there he forms these crucial connections. People like Eliza Boudinot, who really took him under his wing, exposed him to this refined world of books, political debate, and high culture. Foundational stuff for him.
And wasn't there an early connection or near connection with Aaron Burr around this time, his future rival?
Yes, interesting detail in the book. Burr had actually gone to the same school, Elizabethtown Academy, years earlier. And they were both in Elizabethtown around the same time, 1773. So they likely crossed paths, though they didn't really register each other then. What the book highlights is Hamilton's early self-possession. Even as a teenager, clerking back on St. Croix, he was unusually autonomous, had this crisp efficiency and cool self-command, and he gained this intimate knowledge of trade there, which, later helped him set up the Coast Guard and Customs Service. Remarkable foresight, almost.
So he's got this drive, this intellect, but Princeton rejects him. That seems odd.
Well, he wanted to advance more quickly than their rules allowed, basically. So that rejection pushes him towards King's College in New York City.
And New York at that time, simmering with revolution.
Right. The book describes it as both a bastion of British colonial power, but also a place of tremendous revolutionary ferment. And this environment really sharpened the conflicting feelings in Hamilton's nature. He learned to debate fiercely. There's that amazing anecdote where he defends his Tory headmaster, Dr. Miles Cooper, from a mob, stalls them, gives Cooper time to escape.
Nice and vital minutes, as the book says.
Exactly. It shows that peculiar doggedness he had. Like he was already in training for something far beyond humble infantry duty. He was testing himself.
Okay, so then the revolution itself. His military career takes off pretty fast, right? From being just a mere stripling at Trenton, where people were already noting his youth and discipline, to becoming Washington's right-hand man, his chief of staff.
Yeah, and that position, aide-de-camp to Washington, is absolutely key. Chernow emphasizes how close he stood to the center of American politics from 1776 to 1800. Got this incredible wide-angle view of economic, political, and military matters. It massively shaped his thinking. And he and Washington, they developed this shared perspective. Both came to see the need for thinking in terms of the general welfare for a strong central authority.
That partnership seems crucial. And the book also talks about the powerful friendships he formed during the war, like with Lafayette, who saw that unabashed ardor in their bond. or John Lawrence.
Ah, yes, Lawrence. They shared this intense idealism, especially their abolitionist views, which were pretty radical for the time. They actively championed a plan, for slaves to earn their freedom by fighting in the Continental Army.
Which makes his marriage situation a bit complex, doesn't it? Marrying into the Schuyler family.
Very complex. The Schuylers were major slaveholders in New York. The book notes Eliza, his wife, had direct contact with these domestic slaves. And Chernow mentions oblique hints that the Hamiltons themselves might have owned maybe 1 or 2 household slaves. It really underscores the contradictions of the era, even for someone with strong anti-slavery views.
But that marriage to Eliza Schuyler, it was a huge turning point, personally and politically. Beyond the affection, the book makes it clear it gave him the political support of one of New York's blue ribbon families, even after he confessed his illegitimacy to her father, Philip Schuyler, which must have been a big deal.
Absolutely. That support structure, that base, was vital. Because even really early on, like 1780, Hamilton's already thinking big picture financially. He's drafting these comprehensive plans, proposing a central bank. He saw very clearly that financial strength and military power were inextricably linked. That insight, that connection, it really informed all of his subsequent thinking. He wasn't just thinking about war, he was thinking about nation building.
And after the war, he doesn't just rest on his laurels. He becomes a top lawyer in New York, like really top tier.
Oh yeah. Chernow quotes Justice Joseph's story, saying, Hamilton's legal mind, his reach of thought, was so far beyond others that next to him, they were schoolboys.
He was even rivals with Aaron Burr at the bar then, too.
Yes, their paths kept crossing. And his legal work, especially defending loyalists after the war, that really hammered home for him the dangers of states overriding national treaties. It cemented his belief in the need for a constitution that would be the supreme law of the land. He saw this moment, this historic opportunity for America to prove democracy could work, could be stable.
Which leads us right into the Constitutional Convention. He's young there, only 32 according to the book, and he makes waves with that elective monarch proposal, president and Senate serving for life.
Yeah, that definitely raised eyebrows.
Yeah.
It wasn't exactly a call for hereditary monarchy, but it was about creating what he called a permanent will in government. Something stable, insulated from, the shifting winds of popular opinion. He wanted permanence. Of course, his opponents seized on it, gave them damning proof for years of his supposed anti-Republican leanings. But what's also crucial from that period, often overlooked, are his arguments for an independent judiciary. The whole idea of judicial review. That really has its roots in Hamilton's thinking at the convention.
Absolutely foundational for how our system works today. But his most famous contribution from that era has to be the Federalist Papers. He wrote the bulk of them, right? 51 out of 85.
That's right. Just an incredible output. And the core argument he hammered home was that governments could be created deliberately from reflection and choice, not just through accident and force. He warned, prophetically really, that without a strong union, the states would just squabble, maybe even descend into militarism.
And then he had to fight for ratification in New York. That convention sounds like it was intense.
Oh, absolutely critical. The book says he was implacable, just totally resolved. He apparently declared the convention shall never rise until Constitution is adopted. His speeches were described as combining the poignancy of vinegar with the smoothness of oil. A potent mix.
Wow. Vinegar and oil.
And his success there was huge. People were so thrilled, some apparently wanted to rename New York City Hamiltoniana. It really marks the peak, maybe, of his popular acclaim, a height he never quite reached again in the same way.
Okay, so the Constitution is ratified, Washington is president, and Hamilton becomes the first Treasury Secretary. The book calls him an administrative genius here, basically inventing the department.
He really did. He built it from almost nothing. Supervised the largest department, 39 employees initially, which sounds tiny now, but was significant then, and right away people feared he was building his own little empire, a personal power base.
And then comes his report on public credit, a massive step.
A giant running leap, as Chernow puts it. Hamilton believed deeply that opinion is the soul of public credit. It was all about trust, credibility. But the plan itself, especially assuming state debts and paying off old war bonds at face value, huge controversy.
Especially since speculators had bought many of those bonds cheap from soldiers and farmers.
Exactly. But Hamilton's goal was strategic. He wanted to tie the moneyed interests, the wealthy class, directly to the success of the new nation. He thought property ownership gave people independent judgment. What's really insightful here, I think, is seeing how he wasn't just crunching numbers. He was actively trying to engineer a national identity, a shared stake in the government, through financial policy.
And this is where the battle lines really get drawn with Jefferson and Madison, isn't it? The book makes it clear. Hamilton's financial system was a direct catalyst for the first political parties, the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans.
Absolutely. The fights over assuming state debts, the creation of the Bank of the United States, these weren't just policy debates. They were fundamental disagreements about the future shape and power of the federal government.
And Washington seemed to consistently back Hamilton.
Overwhelmingly so on the major policy fights. Despite what critics like Senator William McClay called Hamilton's high-pressure lobbying, sometimes maybe even dishonorable tactics. The famous dinner table bargain, where Hamilton supposedly traded votes for the Assumption Plan in exchange for moving the capital south to the Potomac. That's a classic example. Jefferson described Hamilton looking somber, haggard, and dejected during those talks, thinking Hamilton was losing. But Hamilton got his financial system.
Despite all that outward drive and confidence, the book suggests he had deep insecurities. That residual sadness of the driven man and the personal attacks he faced were brutal.
Vicious. John Adams especially never let up on Hamilton's background, calling him the bastard brat of a Scotch peddler, just vile stuff.
Hard to imagine dealing with that level of public vitriol today, though maybe not that different in some ways.
It was a gutter world of personal sniping, as the book says. And it all kind of imploded with the Reynolds affair.
You're right, the adultery scandal, and his decision to publish that pamphlet admitting it all.
An extraordinary decision. He chose, quite deliberately, to sacrifice his private reputation to preserve his public honor, meaning his integrity as Treasury Secretary, proving he wasn't blackmailed over finances.
Unthinkable for most politicians then or now. What about Eliza, his wife, through all this?
The book describes the confession as exquisitely torturing for her, absolutely devastating, but she stayed remarkably loyal to him publicly. Her later life's work tells the real story, though, dedicating decades to collecting his papers, defending his legacy. It shows her unflinching love for him, but also, Chernow notes, her undying hatred for James Monroe, who she blamed for leaking the affair details initially.
Wow, undying hatred, that's strong.
Well, the political climate was just so charged, so paranoid. Hamilton constantly felt targeted by malicious intrigues to stab me in the dark. It clearly wore him down.
Later, under President Adams, he serves as Inspector General, effectively leading the Provisional Army during the Quasi-War with France. And he had some ambitious, maybe overly ambitious ideas then, like seizing Florida and Louisiana.
Yes, the book calls that one of the most flagrant instances of poor judgment in Hamilton's career. It spooked a lot of people, especially Adams, who already resented Hamilton's influence, his pushy and overbearing style. Adams even seemed to fear Hamilton might attempt a coup.
Their relationship completely broke down.
That confrontation in Trenton described in the book basically ended it.
Mm.
And it pushed Hamilton towards a more apocalyptic view of things, fear of internal chaos, civil war, which ironically perhaps led him to support the Alien and Sedition Acts, measures limiting speech and targeting immigrants, which he'd initially been wary of. Shows how fear can change perspectives.
Then, in 1799, Washington dies. That must have been a massive blow for Hamilton personally and politically.
Devastating. The book quotes him. "He was an aegis very essential to me. An aegis, a shield, a protector. It shows just how much he relied on Washington's backing."
And his political star definitely faded after that.
It undeniably did. And in the election of 1800, that incredibly bitter contest, Hamilton makes another controversial move. He publishes this pamphlet attacking fellow Federalist John Adams, trying to boost Charles Pinckney instead. It backfired badly.
Seen as a fatal blow to Adams's chances, and it fractured the Federalists.
Deeply fractured them.
But then comes the electoral tie between Jefferson and Burr. It goes to the House of Representatives. And Hamilton incredibly works behind the scenes to get his arch-nemesis Jefferson elected over Aaron Burr. Why on earth would he do that?
It's one of the most fascinating turns. Despite years of demonizing Jefferson, Hamilton gave what the book calls a candid, fair-minded, and perceptive appraisal of Jefferson in private letters. Why? Because he saw Burr as fundamentally dangerous. A Catiline, a potential traitor to the Republic, a man destitute of any fixed principles. For Hamilton, Burr was an existential threat to the Union he'd worked so hard to build. So national interest, or his view of it, trumped even his deep dislike of Jefferson.
That really speaks volumes about his priorities, maybe, even in disillusionment.
He was definitely disillusioned by then. The book captures him lamenting, "This American world was not made for me." like the country was heading in a direction he didn't want.
And personal tragedy struck again around this time, too. His eldest son, Philip.
Yes, Philip died in a duel in 1801, defending his father's honor, tragically.
Must have been unimaginable for Hamilton, and especially for Eliza.
Absolutely. And the book points out the eerie parallels to Hamilton's own duel later. Philip apparently resolved not to fire first. That likely weighed heavily on Hamilton's mind when he faced Burr. He told Eliza during her grief, "Arm yourself with resignation. We live in a world full of evil." Just heartbreaking stoicism.
Which brings us, inevitably to Weehawken, the duel with Aaron Burr, July 1804.
The book gives such vivid, granular detail. Hamilton choosing the specific pistols, the Wagden flintlocks, owned by his brother-in-law, John Church.
The same ones used in Philip's duel, weren't they?
Yes, and Hamilton's decision, communicated beforehand, to throw away his first shot, to basically not fire at Burr.
Fulfilling his duty to the code of honor as he saw it, without becoming a killer.
Right. He even delayed the duel slightly to finish up some client lawsuits. That sense of professional duty, even then. Chernow confirms Burr likely had no idea Hamilton intended not to shoot him, and Hamilton's second, Pendleton, was adamant that Burr had fired first.
Details are still debated, but the outcome wasn't. Hamilton was mortally wounded.
His final hours, his last words, focused on his family, his debts, and the nation. So poignant. He apparently said, "If they break this union, they will break my heart."
Wow. And Eliza, she outlived him by
50 years, and spent them on what the book calls her holy quest, to rescue his reputation, compile his papers, ensure his legacy wasn't buried by his enemies. Her devotion was incredible.
So, wrapping this up, thinking about it for you, listening, what's the big takeaway? Hamilton's life, laid out so compellingly in the book. It's just this epic story of ambition, incredible resilience, a powerful vision for America. Flawed, maybe, complex, definitely. It's just such a powerful reminder, isn't it? That the foundations of the U.S. weren't built just on abstract ideals. They were forged by real people. Complex, driven, sometimes contradictory individuals.
Exactly. And maybe the question Chernow's work leaves us with is this: how does the story of this one man born in obscurity, defying every odd, building so much of what we take for granted, now how does that make you think about American identity? But the enduring, often unpredictable impact one life can have on the future. It's a lot to ponder.